Okay, can you hear me in the back? Great, thank you. So ladies and gentlemen, the London Sing With Us Choir, which was led by Nina Lainville, you will hear more about the choir, and in fact you will hear more from the choir later in this session, and also later in the festival today at the main gate at 4:30. My name is Aaron Williamon. I'm Professor of Performance Science at the Royal College of Music. Just in case you don't know where the Royal College of Music is, it's just opposite the Royal Albert Hall. We're completely surrounded by Imperial College. So we're only a small college, but we work very intensively with Imperial to look at areas where performance, science, and art come together. And just last year, we launched a partnership called the Center for Performance Science. And what we do within this center is to set grand challenges where the act of performance and where art and science come together to give us understanding into topics like performance and productivity, innovation and entrepreneurship, and health and well-being. Of course, on the one hand, we're very interested in how to make and to keep our performers, our students at the Royal College of Music, the surgeons who study here at Imperial, to keep them very healthy. So we do a lot of research in performers' health and well-being. But we also are very interested in how music interacts with health and well-being. We know that people are motivated to make music. All over the world, people are inspired to listen to it. They consume it. It's embedded in every part of people's lives. And so at the Royal College of Music and in partnership with the medical faculty at Imperial, we're doing a lot of active research to understand the mechanisms that make this work. Of course, there's been interest in how music and health come together for a very long time. The 3rd century BC philosopher Theophrastus claimed that the sound of the flute, and specifically the flute, would cure epilepsy and also cure sciatic gout. A little bit later, in the 15th century, the composer Tinctorus suggested that music could sanctify the soul, it could heal the sick, temper the strains of toil, and all around make you a very good person. Now, today what we do is to try to come to a bit more systematic understanding of how that works. So, for instance, we know from existing studies that music and musical experiences are a very, very powerful part of people's lives. They are not just part of their lives, but they're sources for positive emotion, and they satisfy important psychological needs. And they help facilitate connections with other people, with spirituality. Also help to maintain cognitive and physical skills. More specifically, we see that making music, in studies with older adults, making music has been shown to decrease anxiety, depression, and loneliness, and it's also been shown to increase cognitive functioning. Now, a large part of our work is based around how music and making music can make you physically better, more sound, stronger, and you'll hear some information about how the science behind this has been evolving over the past few years when my colleague Daisy Fancourt speaks in a moment. But I thought I would start by just saying a few words about how music and well-being interact. Well-being is usually conceptualized as having a so-called hedonic perspective, this aspect of subjective experience of happiness and life satisfaction. But it also has a very strong eudaimonic perspective, where psychological functioning is positive and good relationships and self-realization actually are encouraged. So a few years ago, in fact, just about a year and a half ago, we carried out a study with a large intervention study over 10 weeks, where mental health service users in London were taking part in a 10-week group drumming program. Now, Daisy, in a moment, will say more about the empirical results and also changes in things like immune function later. But what I thought I would do is to start by giving you the rationale for why these people wanted to make music and what they got out of specifically making music. And so we interviewed these people over several weeks, and we found that the themes of what they were saying, the benefits, came across in these main categories. So if we look at the first one, there was obviously this subjective experience of pleasure. So one of the participants said, "My cheeks would hurt because I would feel the smiling. I haven't smiled like that for a very long time." And do bear in mind that this was a sample of mental health service users here in London. One person said, even if I felt really tired, it was a sort of alive tiredness rather than a numb, dead, detached tiredness. We also see a notion of increased self-satisfaction and agency. So for example, one person said, it's a doorway to something. Somebody has opened a door into an area that I might never have gone into, which is really exciting. There might be a few more doors out there. And for people who are suffering with mental health problems, that's a very important thing to realize. But there was also a sense of accomplishment with making music. It gives me a new view. I survived it, so that goes in. It's like knowing you can do something and can come out the other end. It's the seed of thinking, I've had the experience of being completely lost and then getting it. We also see a good deal of engagement with a wide range of parts of their lives, more engaged, in fact. And one person said, it was easy to get into a trance because once you've done the drumming for a certain amount of time, collectively, you just go into that place where you're in the moment. You're just there in the moment. A greater sense of self coming with this. I learned something about myself. It tapped a happy part of me. I didn't really feel I could do it, but now I feel that I'm ready. And I feel that I want to be more productive, to start looking for work. I feel more confident. I was fearful to go for an interview and that these people would see that I am, depressed or going up and down. Right now, I still feel positive, so I want to hang on to that feeling. And then finally, there was generally a feeling of enhanced social interaction among our participants. It was nice to not to know who was who. This thing works on another level. We didn't speak. We didn't find out what others were up to or what they do or don't do. I felt that music or what we were doing gave us another way of relating. So at the heart of our findings of this study, and again, these are just the qualitative results, and you'll hear more about the quantitative findings later. We were finding that learning to make music was at the core, and all of these areas such as self-satisfaction, accomplishment, engagement, enhanced social interaction were feeding into this sense of meaning, this eudaimonic well-being. But of course, we also were tapping aspects of hedonic well-being, where people were feeling more pleased, more happy. Now, a few years ago, the New Economics Foundation, which is a think tank based here in London, looked at all of the literature around well-being, the empirical literature, and tried to distill out the 5 things actually that are common to people who have high levels of well-being. These things are giving to other people, being active physically and being active with other people, connecting in your environment, in local surroundings, taking notice of what's around you, and also keep learning. So the empirical literature suggests that people who do these things usually score much higher on tests of well-being. So let's look back at our findings and see, well, with regard to our study, we were finding that in fact, yes, our participants were indeed, by making music, able to connect with other people. They were able to be active and to take notice of their surroundings, to give to others in the community, and to learn something new. So I would put to you that one very good way to well-being is actually to make music. And on that basis, I'm going to hand over to my colleague, Daisy, who will hand me back my 18-month-old. Thank you.
Can you all hear me at the back? Microphone working? Fantastic. So today I'm going to talk to you about some of the ways that music can affect your health. And this might be something that you're used to hearing about because we get a lot of it in the newspapers about music being particularly good for maintaining your health. The problem is, every time you get a report about music and good health, you also get a report about music and bad health. So it's quite hard to know what is fact and what is fiction, and whether music is actually something that's good for you. So I wanted to talk about 3 different things that we hear quite a lot about today, and actually delve into the science behind these. And I thought a good place to start was to look at music and stress. So hands up who uses music as a way of helping them to relax when they feel stressed. So pretty much all of us. And this is something that many of us feel instinctively can actually help us. But what's good is, in fact, science is showing that this can actually have some quite deep-seated effects on us, and actually not just relax us psychologically, but also music can relax us biologically. So I'm going to go into this a little bit and tell you about some of the biological pathways that are involved in stress response. So when we feel stressed, there are two different pathways that are particularly crucial. And I like to call these the 1-2 punch, because in a stressful situation, that's exactly how they operate. So the one punch is also called the autonomic nervous system. And this involves a system of nerves that runs from your brain out across your whole body, including into your different organs. So normally, your body is in a state that we can call rest and digest. And this is probably what all of you are in now. So you'll probably be able to hear your heart beating slowly, your breathing being deep, your body gently digesting your lunch. However, when we go into a stressful situation, then our body switches into something that's often called fight or flight response. So our pupils can dilate, our heart beats faster, glucose is released to give us energy, and also, importantly, we get adrenaline released from glands just on top of our kidneys. So this is the one punch. The two punch comes somewhere between 10, 20 minutes later, and this involves a branch of our endocrine or hormone system called the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis, HPA axis. Now, it's a bit of a mouthful, but it's actually quite a helpful title because it tells us exactly what's activated. So first of all, signals are sent from the hypothalamus in the brain, which is this red circle at the bottom, and it's really critical in linking our thoughts and our hormones. And this leads to a cascade of hormones being released, first of all into our pituitary glands, and then on into our bloodstream, where these hormones can travel out across our whole body, again leading to the release of stress hormones such as cortisol from glands just on top of our kidneys. So how is it that music can affect these pathways? Well, I thought that I'd talk about singing, given that you've had such a lovely performance at the start of this talk. So what's been shown from studies we've carried out is that when you sing, it can lead to a release. It can lead to effects in both of these pathways, specifically with biological stress downregulated. So what we see is when you sing, it leads to reductions in both cortisol and adrenaline. Now, I read a study recently that was called research, about research that shows the blatantly obvious. And yes, you could argue that showing that music reduces stress hormones isn't that groundbreaking. But there are a few things that we found out over the last couple of years that are rather interesting. So one of these is that we've done studies where we've simultaneously tested people's psychological response alongside their biological response. And what we've found is that even when people are psychologically very relaxed at the start, in other words, they come in very calmly, they sing for an hour, and therefore they don't psychologically experience much of a reduction because they're already very calm, they can still experience a biological reduction in stress. And this is cool because it suggests actually you can have a biological response to music without even being aware that it's happening. Here's a second fun fact. We tested the same people initially in this low stress singing condition. And then we thought, well, what happens if we put them in a completely different psychological context? So if they go into a high stress performance. So we got them then to do exactly the same experiment a day later, but in front of 700 people. So much, much higher stress. Now, unsurprisingly, what we found was that people were psychologically much more stressed at the start of the singing, but they gradually got calmer as they did their performance. But here's what we'd found in terms of their biological response. Completely the opposite. Now, the fact that we found a bit of a disconnect between the psychology and the biology isn't that surprising, because I mentioned there's a bit of a lag time, for example, with cortisol production. So often we don't see these things completely tying up. But what I think is very interesting is that we're finding the opposite biological response to the same piece of music here. Exactly the same music in the first setting led to a reduction, but in the second setting led to an increase. And this is interesting because a few studies over the years have suggested that music can just resonate with specific biomarkers in our body. In other words, there can be this direct relationship between music and our immune systems. Some studies have even put cells in Petri dishes, played music at them, and claimed that the cells grow differently. And this is all well and good until we remember that cells don't have ears. There is simply no way they can hear what's being played to them. At best, vibration's happening. But what our results are showing is that it's not necessarily about specific music resonating with specific biomarkers. The psychological context in which we experience music can profoundly affect our biological response to it. Here's a final fun fact. We found the same biological responses to music, and we've tested this in a number of studies now, regardless of people's age, their gender, their musical experience, any musical training, their familiarity with the music, and even how much they like it. You might have thought that all of these things would be perhaps stopping you having a biological response to music, but in fact, we find this regardless. And as I said, we've showed this in a number of studies now. So it suggests that actually our relaxation response to music is quite deep-seated within us. I'm going to move on to another thing that you hear about quite a lot now. And this is the idea that music can affect our mental health. Now, there are a lot of organizations now that are delivering music projects for people with different mental health conditions, whether that's depression, schizophrenia, bipolar disorder. And there's been a lot of research into this as well now, and a number of studies have shown that actually music can be an effective way of reducing the symptoms of mental health conditions. Erin mentioned earlier that we conducted some studies looking with mental health service users in London. And one of the studies that we conducted was working with people taking part in drumming groups. So we had people who were using mental health services, so they had anxiety or depression, and they came along and they took part over 10 weeks, doing an hour of drumming every week. And drumming is a really therapeutic activity because it takes part in a circle, which is very inclusive. You've not got to have any skill. You can just join in, even at a very basic level. And it's quite a grounding thing. Having watched a number of the sessions when we were gathering data, it's very rhythmic, and you can see how it can be something that could become rather relaxing for you. So we had two groups in our study. We had one group of mental health service users who didn't take part in any music for 10 weeks, and the other group did this drumming every week. So in terms of anxiety and depression, on the left-hand side, you can see anxiety levels, and this is the change from baseline. So they already had anxiety issues at the start. But you can see that across 10 weeks, there wasn't really much change from their initial level in terms of their anxiety. And on the right, you've got depression as well. So normally, you wouldn't expect people to have a change across 10 weeks. And this is what we found for the people who drummed every week. They had 20% reductions in their anxiety levels over the 10 weeks and 38% reductions in their depression. What's more, these effects actually lasted for 3 months following the end of the study. So this is exciting because it adds to the body of literature showing that music can actually affect mental health conditions. But it also suggests that even a relatively short dose, like 10 weeks, can actually add up and over time actually lead to a longitudinal effect on your mental health. Sadly, we don't know how long it carried on beyond those 3 months, but this is promising, and we're actually doing more research looking at this at the moment. But one of the things we particularly wanted to look at was why this might be happening. And you may have seen in the news over the last year, there's been a number of reports that have come out about studies looking at the biology of mental health. And one of the things that's been shown is that people with mental health conditions such as depression can have heightened levels of inflammation in their immune system. In fact, about 30 to 50% of people who have depression have inflammation, higher levels than we'd expect to find. But what's been shown is that a number of different medications, where some of the ways they act is via reducing levels of inflammation. So they can actually reduce inflammatory pathways. And it's also been shown that you can reduce inflammation through things like mindfulness. So it's not just drugs that can actually lead to reductions in people who've got depression. Some of the particularly important biomarkers in this inflammatory response are called cytokines. And they're a little bit like messengers in the immune system. They communicate between cells. They can travel all around the body, even into the brain. Broadly speaking, cytokines can be classed as either pro-inflammatory or anti-inflammatory. So the pro-inflammatory ones promote inflammation levels, and the anti-inflammatory ones can reduce inflammation in the body. And we've carried out a number of studies now looking at music and inflammation to see whether music can actually modulate inflammatory pathways and cytokine levels. And some of the studies we carried out were actually with Tenovus Cancer Choirs, and you heard some of them performing at the start of the study. We carried out a study about 3 years ago with some of the Sing With Us choirs in Wales, and we wanted to see whether singing could modulate these cytokines. So we did one study that involved just an hour of singing. And what we found was that across the hour, there was a reduction in cortisol levels, so a reduction in their biological stress, which is kind of what we'd expect following on from our other studies. But we also found increases in a whole range of these cytokines. Now, stress and cytokine activity are kind of linked. We know that stress can suppress immune activity. So what we found here essentially was a reduction in stress and a boost in immune activity. But when we started to look into this into a bit more detail, we found some more things emerging. So the things that are in pink on the right-hand side, these are pro-inflammatory cytokines, and they promote inflammation. And interestingly, these are the ones that increase the least. In fact, statistically, these didn't increase enough for us to call them significant. But some of the prominent anti-inflammatory cytokines, for example, IL-4, interleukin-4, they actually did increase significantly. So we were finding more of a response from the anti-inflammatory pathways rather than the pro-inflammatory pathways. And in fact, when we did some further analyses, we found that people who had the greatest improvement in their mood over the hour of singing had the lowest levels of inflammation at the end. Now, this was just one of our studies. We've been conducting a whole range of other studies looking at inflammation and cytokines and music. And we found effects not just across 1 hour, but also across several weeks of engagements. We've just been carrying out studies looking at postnatal depression and inflammation with music, and we've been carrying out studies with older adults as well. I've sadly not got time to go into them all. But this does illustrate that it's not just music affecting some of the psychological symptoms of mental health problems. It's also linked in with some of the underlying biological pathways, and this is really exciting evidence. Now, one of the big questions, of course, is why is it that making music can have these effects? And Erin mentioned earlier the importance of the social side of it that can often come with music activities. And this is the third thing that I thought I'd mention today, and this is how music is linked in with social support, specifically making us feel less lonely. Now, I think one of the interesting things here is if we look back historically, making music was always something that was social. In fact, amongst our early ancestors, group music was actually very much a social activity, often accompanied by dance and rituals. The university has done a lot of research into this. And he said that grooming was very effective when you had relatively small groups. But as soon as we started to get larger brains, we started to be able to deal with greater levels of complexity. I'm going to come back to this in a sec, but two of the things that are particularly important in grooming are the biomarkers that are released. And it's been shown that grooming leads to increases in oxytocin, which is often called the love hormone, and also endorphins, which are often associated with feelings of elation, like the runner's high. So what Dunbar showed was that grooming was linked in with these biomarkers, but grooming stopped being effective once we started to have particularly large brains because we started being able to deal with greater complexity. And what this meant was that our group sizes started to get bigger. Now, grooming was fine when you had, say, 12 people that you wanted to bond with. But actually, as soon as you got above about 50 people, it became incredibly impractical. So Dunbar has proposed that actually grooming gradually evolved into laughter, which evolved into singing. So he's argued there's actually an evolutionary purpose for singing as a way of bonding us. Now, today, we're very aware of the importance of being socially connected. In fact, research has shown that people who are lonely are between 2 and 5 times more likely to die prematurely. In fact, research recently showed that being lonely is as much a risk for your mortality as smoking 15 cigarettes a day. So it's incredibly important that we have good social connections around us. And music can be a really powerful way of achieving this. And I mentioned before some of our studies about drumming. One of the other things we measured was social resilience. So again, you can see here the dotted line was the people who didn't take part in drumming. And the hard black line is the people who did take part over the 10 weeks. And they had an increase of about 23% in how much social resilience they felt they had. And this is often something that's affected by mental health conditions. It's really important that people have social support in place. And this is just one of the areas we're looking at. We've also been doing biological studies looking at things like oxytocin and beta endorphin and finding that these are indeed modulated when people sing. I wish I had time to go into more of this in detail, but I want you to have a chance to hear some of our fantastic singers again today. So I'll just say these are only some of the ways that music can affect us. If you're interested in finding out more, then this is a massive plug. But I do have a book which is just out, looking at this in more detail. So just to whet your appetite, music can also help premature babies to gain weight faster. It can help Parkinson's patients to walk, and it can even help people with dementia to have stronger memories as well. But as I said, I'd like to give a chance for you to hear some more singing. If you have any questions, we're going to be heading over to the room opposite afterwards, where we're happy to answer any. But for now, please will you join me in welcoming back the Sing With Us choir and Nina, their leader. Thank you.
Singing will ever be the same after this. I'll be like imagining all my anti and pro-inflammatory or like all these things going through our bodies. Thank you so much. I hope you enjoy it, and we've got a little surprise for you afterwards, so please stay with us. Yeah, that's it. So you have no idea what we're singing. No. introduced earlier on, we are the London Sing With Us Choir. We are part of Tenovus Cancer Care, which is a cancer charity very well known in Wales, but completely unknown here in London. But we are here to represent it, and we sing every Wednesday, just literally 10 minutes walk from here. We welcome everybody affected by cancer, and that is quite wide. So it's people going through cancer at the moment who have been in the past, also their family, carers, health professionals. It's a big mix, and it's important for us that it stays like that. It's a very friendly group. We sing from 5:30 to 7 every Wednesday. You don't need to have sung in a choir before. A lot of our members never have. You don't need to have to be able to read music in any way. We are very keen to welcome everyone. I mean, you've already know what it does to your body, so I don't need to explain that. But all I can say is that it's always a treat, and I'm sure that you can talk to all these people afterwards, and they'll tell you how it really affects their lives and my lives as well, leading them. So the little surprise is, I'd like us to experience all these wonderful things that we have heard of just now, and we're all going to sing. And so I'm going to teach you a song, and we're going to sing it, and then we're going to split the room in two, and we're going to sing it in a round, and we're going to experience very quickly, in literally 10 minutes I've got, to make you experience singing in harmony, and this is exactly what we do every Wednesday. So, the choir's going to help you. They already know the song. So maybe choir, if I could ask you one part to maybe go on over there, and the other over there, so maybe on the stairs, or if you find a seat, please sit down, okay? We're going to sing Wade in the Water, okay? Oh, I can see some people leaving already. Ah,
Wade in the water. That's one of my favourites.
So, you might have heard this one before, so it goes like this. Wade in the water, wade in the water, children, wade in the water. God's gonna trouble these waters. Very easy. We're going to learn the words first, so we're going to do the words in rhythm. Wade in the water. Off we go. Wade in the water. Beautiful. Wade in the water, children. Wade in the water, children. Wade in the water. Wade in the water. God's gonna trouble these waters. God's gonna trouble these waters. You are magnificent. Really well done. So, I'm going to take it a little bit lower and go, wade in the water. Wade in the water. Wade in the water, children. Wade in the water, children. Simple trick, but I don't hear it very often. To sing, open your mouth, okay? A lot of us try to sing like this. It's not going to work, okay? If you look at your singers on TV and all, they'll all be like this. For a simple fact, it's just easier, okay? You unlock the door. Wade in the water, children. Wade in the water, children. Fantastic. Wade in the water. Wade in the water. God's gonna trouble these waters. God's gonna trouble these waters. Beautiful. Okay, we're doing the whole thing. You're so good. We're just going straight into it. Off we go. Wade in the waters. Wade in the waters, children. Wade in the waters. God's gonna trouble these waters. Beautiful. Really well done. To add just a little technical tip, which really helps as well as opening the jaw, unlocking the jaw and opening the mouth, is to really think that you've got loads of air coming from, well, you're sitting at the moment. So let's say coming from your seat, okay, and going all through your body, loads of air out to feed the sound, always, okay? Let's sing it one more, like with this image of bringing out. Wade, off we go. With the sound, suddenly it's a lot more grounded and a lot more powerful, okay? I like it. Second part. Sometimes I feel like a motherless child. Sometimes I feel like a motherless child. Sometimes I feel like a motherless child, a long way from home. Words. Sometimes I feel like a motherless child.
Sometimes I feel like a motherless child.
Good. And I love this sentence because it's like, ugh, you can put everything you want in there, okay? So you think of those consonants, sometimes, whatever, and you really put whatever's going on through you in those consonants. Sometimes I feel like a motherless child.
Sometimes I feel like a motherless child.
Fantastic. And we're going to repeat that 3 times, and then a long way from home.
A long way from home.
And here it's more about the vowels. A long, let the sound really occupy the whole of your mouth. A long way from home. Off we go.
A long way from home.
Beautiful. Sometimes I feel like a motherless child.
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 A long way from home.
A long way from home.
Beautiful. The whole thing, off we go.
Sometimes I feel like a motherless child. Sometimes I feel like a motherless child. Sometimes I feel like a motherless child. A long way from home.
Beautiful sound. Really, really nice. It's so lovely to hear. We're going to put those two together. Wade in the water, followed by sometimes I feel. Okay? Wade, off we go.
Wade in the water. Wade in the water, children. Wade in the water. God's gonna trouble these waters. Sometimes I feel like a motherless child. Sometimes I feel like a motherless child. Sometimes I feel like a motherless child. A long way from home.
Beautiful. I will ask everyone to stand up. And we're going to make our little performance. So we're going to split the group in 2. Splitting the group in 2. So we have group 1 over here. People in the middle, you get to decide where you want to go. Group 1 over here. Group 2 over there. And group 1, you're going to start wading the water. And group 2, you're going to start with sometimes I feel. Okay? Sometimes wade. You guys will keep going on to sometimes I feel. You will go on to wade in the water. We're going to sing the whole thing twice. Okay? So you're going to sing both songs twice. We'll see if that works. If it doesn't work, doesn't matter. Did you know they say sometimes? Wait. Wait sometimes.
Sometimes I feel like a motherless child. Sometimes I feel like a motherless children. Sometimes I feel like a motherless child. A long way from home.
Okay, I'm going to stop this. The sound is absolutely beautiful, really well done. But what we're not quite doing at the moment, which is essential for choir, is listening to the other group. Okay? Sounding great, but the whole thing is not quite mixing. I can see. So we're going to do that again, just making sure that we're really listening, and then I promise we're finished, okay? Wait sometimes.
Sometimes I feel like a motherless child.
would welcome you to, one very important thing. So the lovely people that you've seen here today explaining about everything that goes on when you just sing like you just did, we are doing a research project alongside our choir to prove the benefits of singing for people affected by cancer. We always need more people for the research. We also need people who don't want to sing in a choir but still want to be part of the research, which is as helpful for the research. So please, if you are interested in joining the choir or helping us with the research, please talk to Katie over here, and we'll take your details and we'll send you all the information. Thank you so much for being brave and taking part, and have a lovely rest of the day.